I'm so thrilled to be here and joined by these esteemed mayors, but I would be remiss if I didn't start off by saying Dr. Bernice King preached a whole sermon earlier, right? Yes. And she really brought it home when she talked about how we are energy collectively powering this movement towards equity, towards inclusion, towards justice. And she also talked about how we need to package this energy and these experiences and distribute it widely, because we know that to turn pilots into policy, we have to humanize poverty. And just imagine having to humanize human beings, right? That's crazy. But people have this twisted notion that when you give people who are struggling a hand up, because it's not a handout, that they're going to do something nefarious with it, like spend it on drugs or spend it on alcohol. But we've heard directly from recipients of guaranteed income, and they've talked about how they've used the money to invest in themselves. And we've heard their stories. And like they have stories, our electeds here have stories as well. And so rather than me giving these long drawn out introductions, I think they're the best to speak for themselves. And starting off with, why are you here today? And why are you personally invested in guaranteed income?
Want to start with me?
Yes.
So I'm Levar Stoney. I'm the mayor of Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Y'all may have heard of it before. How did I come to guaranteed income? Well, you know, it is personal to me. Don't let the decent suit fool you.
The nice suit.
Thank you. But, you know, I was raised in a family where, you know, we did not have a lot of resources. And, you know, when you run for mayor, people want you to tell your story, but then folks start to tell your story. So I choose to tell my own story.
That's right.
They say I was born to a couple teenagers and I was born in a poor home. But for me, that was a home filled with love. I felt like I had access to everything I needed. There was always a roof over my head. Always had food on the table. But did my parents struggle? Did my grandmother who raised me struggle? Did my father, who was formerly incarcerated, returning citizen, did he struggle? Yes. We had a lot of hardship. And from an early age, I was responsible for handling the finances of my home, of my grandma's home. They gave me the checkbook. Some of y'all don't know what a checkbook looked like anymore.
No.
There were no debit cards and no, Apple Pay. It was a checkbook and a ledger, and that's what I did. I was responsible for keeping track of the finances every month from the time I was 8 years old. And I had to write out the electric bill, the rent, all that. I did all of it. But also was my responsibility to check the bank account on the 20th of the month, the 25th of the month, and report out. So I'd call the bank, and then my grandma would say, so how much do we have? And I had to tell her, Grandma, we only have $25 in the bank. And it's September 20th. And so then we had to make do for the next 10 or so days until her Social Security check hits the account. Now, I didn't think that was poverty, but that is the brink, that is the cliff that families in my city and the cities you'll hear about today are living on each and every day. And I just think if my grandmother had access to $500 a month, no questions asked, the things that we could have done, the stress that would have never been experienced because of that. And so I come to it personally, and I see the folks I work for each and every day. Those are people like my grandmother, people like my father. Right. And so it becomes personal. When it becomes personal, it becomes a passion as well.
Thank you.
I'm Mayor Adrian Perkins of Shreveport, Louisiana, and I gotta tell y'all, I think Mayor Stoney just stole my entire pitch. So I'm a little lost for words. We spend too much time together.
We
man.
do.
We really do. My story is very similar. What brings me here? Not only as mayors do we get pitched all the time. By the way, every day, all day. But not only do we have to do our research and we look at that quantifiable data and we study programs and see, that people that get guaranteed income, how they're spending money on education and transportation and all these responsible things. But I have a personal story that I can rely on as well. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana, the town I'm the mayor of right now. I was born and raised there. I was born in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Shreveport. And my story starts with my mom. My mother raised me and my 3 older brothers by herself, and I watched the hardest working woman I've ever encountered work 2 jobs. She would pick me up from my elementary or middle school, and she would go and clean bank buildings and office buildings. I would do my homework. I remember legs swinging, just doing homework, waiting till mom got off her second job. The nights that she didn't work her second job, she would go to school. She actually earned a bachelor's degree when I was in middle school. So I just watched my mom work her fingers to the bone. And even though she worked that hard, we still didn't have much. I still remember nights when we would go to bed and, my mom would lay out plates for us at the dinner table, and then she would just disappear because there wasn't enough food for her to eat. I remember plenty of nights, just the neighborhoods that we had to live in, and we bounced around quite a bit even within that neighborhood. The neighborhoods we had to live in, I remember plenty of nights where I was sleeping under the bed because I was afraid of drive-by shootings. So even watching my mom, be this stand-up citizen and work that hard for her family. My mom doesn't curse, by the way. I've heard her say pissed one time in my life. She doesn't drink alcohol. She doesn't smoke anything. And watching this angel of a woman struggle like that, the same thoughts were always in my mind on what could my mother have done with an additional $400, $500 a month? How many more sports games could she have attended? Could she have just not had that second job and actually spent time with her boys? So that's always been at the top of mind. So when Mayor Tubbs reached out to me and asked me would I want to be a participant, I jumped at it without looking at that data. That was one of those times I probably should have done my due diligence, but I had so much of personal experience that I could rely on. That was one of those things where I was super happy to be one of the founding mayors, and I'm happy at where we are today in Shreveport and changing the lives of 110 of our residents, and we're hoping to expand that program too and also codify it, not just in legislation, but also in budget. So excited to be here, but that's what brings me here.
All right, and your mom is a saint. She don't drink, cousin. Woo, she might not like me too much. Mayor Siddiqui.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be in this company. I am here because of my lived life experience. There's a theme here. And I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts after coming here with my twin brother and my parents when I was about 2 from Karachi, Pakistan. So we've heard this story. They came here for the American dream. And they got here, and none of their skills translated over. And they had to ultimately get multiple jobs. We were lucky because we had access to affordable housing. We had access to public assistance, to various resources. But similar to what you're hearing, there was a lot of struggle, an inability to make ends meet. And so for me now as mayor, I can see these struggles in our community. I'm still so close to so many of these families and know their stories. And so how we got to guaranteed income was actually because after COVID hit and the pandemic hit, we launched something called the Mayor's Disaster Relief Fund. And we were able to raise about $5 million, over $5 million in private donations and distribute that as direct cash assistance during those beginning months. And heard directly from our families saying, this direct cash assistance has been a lifeline during such rough times. Is there a way to make this more consistent? And this was the same time as about October 2020. And that's when I learned about MGI and decided to join MGI because I saw that piloting a guaranteed income was the next step in our community. And since we've piloted it, I've seen directly what an impact it has had. And so that's why we're continuing to expand on RISE. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Cantrell.
Well, good afternoon, and it is absolutely a privilege and just an honor to be here. and always with my brother and sister mayors. I too, it's my life story. My mother, a single mom, was a welfare to work. I saw her work ethic come through and through, every single day. And I saw how a little bit just went a long way. But even more than that, she was able to, she worked for LA County, a social worker. When LA County laid off in the early 80s, when crack cocaine hit the scene, it was like an eraser in my family. And then that moved me with my grandmother. And then again, my brother Mayor hearing your story about that month when bills were due and seeing my grandmother get sick, after facing the reality of how much she had and how much the expenses actually were. So seeing that and living through that, but also being a community organizer, and right after Hurricane Katrina, and I was leading my community through recovery, we created a quick strike program because our folks needed resources. And so I had a family, actually a single mom, come to me and she said, listen, I need help, paying this bill that is providing a refrigerator in my rental unit. I need to pay this rent to own, for the beds that my children are sleeping in. I need help paying this bill. And I said, well, I'm not gonna pay the bill. I'm gonna buy that washer and dryer. We're gonna buy that refrigerator. We're gonna buy those beds. And that immediately put that money back into her pocket. And every single month. So turning that map around a little bit, embracing Mayors for Guaranteed Income, it was like, wait a minute, I don't have to decide how this mom or this family spends that money. They know where the needs are, right? And so lifting up the program was a no-brainer, and specifically understanding the demographics of my city, where the needs are the greatest, and focusing on a generational economic development plan to move people out of a lifetime of poverty. So we decided as a city, and looking at our youth and our state, 49th in the country in terms of child well-being, the lowest, and that's from the United Way in terms of ALICE. So we decided as a city to focus on a demographic of 16 to 24, young people that were disconnected from work as well as school. And of course, this was exacerbated during COVID, and the need was absolutely there. So we decided to focus on 125 young people, Opportunity Youth, partner with 9 organizations that work specifically with Opportunity Youth, and for 10 months providing them with $350 a month. And so again, this is personal in every way, a life learned and lived experience, but meeting people where they are is the only way that we're going to ensure that we bring people along.
Absolutely. And yes, please. I'm glad you guys talked about the personal impact, because so often when we talk about poverty, when we talk about people on the lower rungs of the income ladder, people treat them as though poverty is their punishment, as though the time away from their family is their punishment, like they've done something wrong. And so it's important that people understand the love and the community and the time, the mental health, the physical health, as you talked about, that goes into what this helps provide. Because the people that deserve peace of mind, it should not be tied to your bank account or your pedigree, if we want to put it that way. Everybody deserves that. That's part of the humanity of us all. So I appreciate you showing that, because we tend to put people in a level and not recognize that you can come up from that with the right resources and the right community. So thank you. Now, your colleague in Birmingham, Mayor Woodfin, has said that each city has its own story, has its unique characteristics and challenges, but they also have a similar set of circumstances and issues. So starting off with you, Mayor Cantrell, I'll start with you first this time. Can you tell us what makes New Orleans, I didn't say that, 'cause don't talk about my accent. Maybe you can do it for me, okay? What makes New Orleans special? Help me out here. Okay.
Well, listen, the city of New Orleans is the most Afrocentric
Okay, here we
city
go. Apparently you just say it
in
normal.
the United States of America.
Okay.
Our culture is rooted and grounded in her own people. And a part of that has also kept a large portion and population of my city in poverty. And where we definitely have hospitality and tourism, which is the #1 industry, which we love, but at the same time, it's kept people marginalized. And so while we're focusing on lifting up our culture and investing in our cultural bearers, those, right, who make New Orleans what she is, and I've turned that map around too, because at one point we were marketing, right, marketing the people, marketing our cultural community, but never reinvesting in the people we market, and I would call that pimping our own people.
Okay, hold on.
And so this is just a game changer because one, we get to love on our people, love on our culture, but also again, meet people where they are so that they can truly be a part of the future of the city in a way that they have transferable wealth.
Right. I love that, love on our people, because that's so important. This is an act of love and caring for each other as brother and sister. Mayor Siddiqui?
Sure. So Cambridge is a dynamic and diverse city with over 80 languages spoken in our schools. We are home to Harvard and MIT, and we're looked at as this global hub of innovation, and that's all true. But the reality is there's just increasing inequality in our city. It's become a tale of two cities. And I think what makes Cambridge special is that we do recognize this, and we want to use all our tools in the toolbox to combat that rising inequality. And that looks like a few different things. It looks like looking at zoning and making it more flexible so that there's more affordable housing built throughout the city. It's looking at children's savings accounts. It's implementing universal pre-K, universal after school. And it looks like a guaranteed income. And so, I think what makes our community special is that we have a community that rallies behind these ideas because we want everyone in our city to succeed. So that's a little bit about Cambridge.
All right, thank you. Mayor Perkins?
Yeah, so Shreveport, so good things about Shreveport, and some people don't think about this, but at one point in time, Shreveport was the farthest western city in the United States. We're like the western frontier. We're a river town, and because of that, because a lot of people visited, a lot of wealth started to accumulate in Shreveport. That's kind of how it became a city, and it started to grow. In the 1930s, 1940s, we were actually about the same size as Dallas, Texas. Pretty prominent city. Elvis Presley got his start in Shreveport, so there's a lot of good things I can brag about Shreveport, but there's some bad things as well, right? We're a southern city. Shreveport was one of those.
Enough said.
If we're being frank.
I hear you.
Yeah. And I'm sure you can elaborate a lot more than me in a little bit, but so we were one of the capitals of the Confederacy. We were the parish that we sit in. We got parishes in Louisiana, not counties, for those of you a little weird in Louisiana. But the parish, Caddo Parish, was actually called Bloody Caddo because we led the country in lynchings as well for multiple years in the early 20th century. And we were a part of the civil rights movement. So it's kind of a tale in two cities, and unfortunately, that exists today in my city. If I was to describe Shreveport, and I know you hear this all the time from mayors talking about their city, I would say Shreveport actually has the most potential out of any city in the United States because of our natural resources, our natural advantages, and also because of our people. But there are some barriers that we have to tear down, some of those historical barriers to reconcile those two cities. And if we can meet those challenges as a city and come together as one, it's no telling what we can accomplish. So that's how I would describe our city today. And MGI is actually helping me tear down some of those barriers. So.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
we're a city in the South. Before Atlanta was the capital of the South, Richmond was the capital of the South. And some would say still the capital of the South. But here's the thing. I happen to govern a very historic city. When you look at the history of this country, through the American Revolution, through the Civil War, through the Civil Rights Movement, Richmond has played a role, Virginia has played a role in a lot of that. And so when you look back at that history, you'll see the good, the bad, and the ugly. We were the capital of the Confederacy. We did have the second busiest domestic slave port in the United States of America. Black people, built Richmond. And I will say, there are many who still benefit from the selling of black bodies when Richmond was the number 2 busiest slave port in the country. So, and you look at what the impact that has had on the black residents of my city through the years, trauma, right? Yes, the years move on, the decades move on, and we say we healed, but it's almost like a broken bone that doesn't really ever heal the right way. And sometimes when they say, this is old grandma speak right here, sometimes you gotta break the bone again to make sure it heals the right way. And we've had our flashpoints. Every city has its flashpoints, right? Katrina, Detroit may say when the automobile industry moved out. Pittsburgh will say when they couldn't make steel anymore, they moved. We've all had our flashpoints. Our flashpoint, unfortunately, center in race, in division, in segregation, in discrimination. That's Richmond right there. And now we are becoming a more popular place for people to choose to live. We've seen our population grow. We've seen our economy grow. We've grown culturally as well. But we still are dealing with some of the vestiges of decisions made by prior leaders in my city. I'm not the first black mayor of Richmond. Right. But I realized when I took this job that you have to be just as intentional as those individuals before me were intentional about putting the poorest residents of my city in a certain part of the city. We, as policymakers, have to be just as intentional. And there's only but so many tools that local governments have at our disposal. And this tool right here, guaranteed income, giving folks a hand up and not a hand out, telling them that their current station in life isn't their destination in life, that to me is a game changer. It's a difference maker. And so for me, it's about being intentional, right? Because I know what I'm dealing with. Yes, I know I'm dealing with years and decades and generations of history, but we have to write the new chapter for our people. And you have to be intentional when you do it.
Couldn't agree more. Well, all four of you, along with Mayor Biss and Mayor Carter, who we heard from earlier, are part of the Mayors for Guaranteed Income, which is now 100 mayors strong. Yes, clap it up. And these 100 mayors are across 31 states, representing 29 million Americans. Now, Mayor Perkins, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You got the humble brag in there. You were part of the original 11, the founding 11 mayors, so from 11 to 100, more than 2 years ago in June 2020. Why was
Tell us forgot to invite me. That's why I wasn't.
Oh, okay.
I was in that too.
We just messing with it.
Okay, got a little rivalry up there looking. We all on the same stage together today, okay? But Mayor Perkins gets to the humble brag a little bit more about why you thought it was so important to be one of the founding mayors, and particularly as an elected official, to really show support for guaranteed income. Because shout out to Mayor Michael Tubbs there, but we also had Andrew Yang, who kind of made it a slogan. So it was a political conversation, but this is really a policy and piloting, not just sloganeering. So why was it important for you to show up in that moment?
Yeah, well, I've talked about one of the factors what made this an urgent case for me already and just my background. But another factor, June 2020, audience, where were we in June 2020?
In the house.
The pandemic, no, yeah, exactly, in the house, right? The pandemic, in the middle of the pandemic. And, you know, for elected officials that are out every day talking to people, like that's our jobs, you know, hugging, kissing babies, the whole thing. We couldn't do that at the time. So I was literally calling, my staff would give me a call list of 30 citizens that I would call every single day to just check on them, to see how things were going. And I kept having these alarming phone calls where parents were telling me, I just got laid off. Like, I have no idea how I'm paying for food tonight for my family. You know, is there anything you can do to help? I just lost my job. Like, I got to pay for rent. Yeah, I have no idea. They're still asking for rent. Is it true that, you know, we don't have to pay rent, asking questions like that? But people we're in a state of desperation, not just, you know, being afraid of the pandemic, but we were in an economic crisis as well. So that was that second factor of like, this is urgent. Like, I really have to throw all my energy and effort towards this to make sure that it's successful. And not just successful, like, you know, Shreveport is extremely important to me. That's my primary job, but I want this to be successful like nationwide. Like, we need that. We aren't federal officials making, you know, decisions in DC that can impact everybody. But if I can be a part of a story in my city that ties to Stockton, that ties to Richmond, we can create change that way. And, you know, just getting that feedback from the bottom up, I knew that that's what this country needed. Earlier, Dr. King was talking about the fact that the economy is going to go up and down, and it's always going up and down. You know, that guaranteed income, if we can just benchmark something for our families that are struggling, so that when we go through a pandemic, that they have something to hold on to, that they don't have to go through those worries. When we go through a market crash that those families ain't got nothing to do with, that they still have something to hold on to. They can still, you know, hang on to that integrity and that dignity in the family. You know, that's something that I wanted to be a part of. So the moment in 2020 called for me to be even more excited and even more, you know, make this even more urgent for me. So that was, you know, why I was one of the founding mayors, on top of the fact that, you know, Tubbs asked me to be.
Right. Well, you don't get to 100 mayors without naysayers. We don't like them, but they out there. And Mayor Cantrell, I'm gonna let you get to this one. Because, you know, there are naysayers that say that these local pilots don't matter because long-term the funding isn't gonna come from the local level, it's gonna come from other sources, federal level perhaps. Can you talk about, shut them down, why local politics matters and why these mayor-led pilots are so important?
At the local level, you know, mayors have been on the front lines. We lead on the line. And I think that has been more demonstrated over the past 5-6 years than we've seen ever before, from the Paris Climate Agreement, you know, with the U.S. coming out, and mayors had to say, oh no, climate change is real, leading the charge there. I mean, at every single level, from going through the pandemic, for example, when direct allocation was nowhere in sight, when money went to the state and our cities got screwed, it was the mayors on the front line pushing for and advocating for a direct allocation. And thank God we were able, you know, working together throughout this country, brothers and sisters, standing up. We went to battle. And as a result of that, we received direct allocation with the American Rescue Plan dollars. So my point is, we don't have a choice, because our people depend on us every single day. We live in the community. They know how to show up at our homes. You know, I'm grassroots all the way. So we cannot hide and we cannot run, nor do we want to. We want to deliver. And so that's where it happens, on that front line.
Right. Mayor Siddiqui, you know, Mayor Cantrell just mentioned being on the front lines as mayor. And earlier we heard from two constituents, Portia and Rose, about their experiences. And Portia talked about how seeing someone like you advocate for what she called those that are silent, that just needed a push, helped her feel like she can believe in the American dream. And so can you talk about how being a mayor how you help your constituents feel seen and how the government can help their constituents feel seen.
Sure, yeah. Portia and Rose, her story is incredible, and I'm so glad that many will be able to see her story. I think about guaranteed income, and I think it's the most direct way to say to someone, we see you, we see that you need help, and we trust you to make a decision about how to use money to best help your family. And as a country, you've heard throughout this day how hard we make it for people. Your rent goes up, the housing authority is calling you. We make it so hard for our residents to be on assistance, and I really view government and our role in government to make people's lives better. So I think about Portia, and I think about all the other recipients who come to me and say, this is really making a difference. And it all goes back to government seeing them and being able to provide those tools for them. I think we are on the front lines, and there's my Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley, always says this. She says, those closest to the pain should be informing policy.
Right.
And I think so that's why we have to keep Portia and all the Portias and many of our residents in mind when we do this work.
Absolutely. So Mayor Cantrell told us about her program, but I want to hear from each of you a little bit more about your program, because you all target different demographics. And so starting with you, Mayor Stoney, can you tell us about why you targeted that specific demographic and who you're targeting with your program?
Yeah, we have over 60 plus individuals who are part of our Richmond Resilience Initiative. We want to build in resilience in people's lives, right? Because as was stated, life is, our time here is always going to change, right? We're going to have bad economies, we're going to have a crisis, natural disaster. And so we, as cities, always work on building in resiliency, but also our people need resiliency as well. So we created a Richmond Resilience Initiative. These are individuals who are working, who already have jobs, but also don't have access to benefits. So this is sort of fills the gap, meets them where they are. And our next cohort, we're going to add to it, we're going to add a focus on returning citizens, formerly incarcerated individuals, because as we know, when looking at the reentry systems across the country, a lot of them fail, right? They fail our people who are leaving, they've served their time, they paid their debt to society, but they come out with zero, with nothing. Sometimes a lack of clothes, shoes, just basics, essentials. And so we're going to roll that cohort out here soon enough using American Rescue Plan dollars as well. And it's my hope, by the time I only have 2 years left as mayor, I'm term limited, we want to turn this pilot into policy. And as you all know, you make policy through budgetary decisions. And so I've already readied my team already for, hey, we're going to be putting this in the budget. I want you to know that. There's going to be naysayers.
Absolutely.
There's going to be folks out there saying, I can't believe the mayor's doing this, doing that, doing the other. But then I like to turn it back on them. So what are you going to do? So what are you going to do? Right? Because I don't want to see another study about, poverty in this part of the city and health disparities and all this and other. And then so what are you going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And so, team, it's coming. It's coming.
Breaking news.
Well, yeah. Don't tell it's coming though.
Well, I think that's particularly brave because, we don't invest in our reentry initiatives. We increase policing, we increase the district attorney's office, but not the reentry.
And urban localities are where the returning citizens, this is where they return to. They return to us. And so just like we treat, we have to be compassionate, right? We have to be intentional. We just can't just let folks, end up, without a home. We have to step up. And this is our version of stepping up.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Mayor Perkins.
Is this group from Richmond over here? I knew something was up because when you started talking, they were clapping, and I'm like, wait a minute.
They might be on the payroll.
You didn't put your sharing section?
They on the payroll.
I think Mayor
But
Perkins.
they do good work. The Office of Community Well Building over here.
So these like
Let's give Mayor Perkins some applause. He's feeling a little jealous. Come on. Clap it up, clap it up. Okay.
He is a founding mayor. I mean, he's on his talking points here. Repeat 5 times.
As Mayor Cantrell pointed out, as I point, these are like my family members. So we talk afterwards, and I'll be like, man, Levar, you really had a lot of people cheering for you, man. I didn't do too well in that panel. Okay, back
Professional
to the point.
development. You got to get them out here.
Back to the point. Sorry, being observed. Back to the point. Our program, we have 110 residents that are participating in our program. The stipulations: you have to be 18 years of age, and you have to be a resident of Shreveport. You also is also for single parents as well, and your income can't exceed 120% of the poverty level. Something that was crazy. When we opened up our guaranteed income portal for people to apply, we had 14,000 people apply within 48 hours. It's the most oversubscribed initiative I have ever, nothing. The most oversubscribed initiative. By the end of the month window, we had 22,000 residents apply to that program. Obviously, some of them didn't qualify, but that just reinforced to me that there is a lot of struggling citizens in my city to apply to this program. There's a lot of pain, economic pain and suffering that are out there. So the program is up and running right now. Something also that's unique about our program, we actually got our parish, once again, parish is not county, so we got our parish to match funding and put up $500,000 of public funds into this.
Thank you.
So one of those, like I said, codifying and not in just legislation, but also in the budget. So our parish put it up. So we're able to expand that out into the parish, and we're going to continue to go next budget cycle, or the budgeting cycle that we're in now. We're looking to put city funds into it, and we're going to. The parish has already signaled to us that they're willing to put more funding into this program. So we're trying to codify it, like I said, in the budget. But something I want to just quickly say before passing the mic about this conversation, some themes I've picked up. Diversity is so important when it comes to governing. Not just racial diversity or religious diversity, but socioeconomic diversity. And people don't realize that, Levar made the joke about, oh, you see this nice suit now, but in all actuality, if you rewind our lives and you look at us when we were coming up, this is a very improbable place for us to be, because we know the American story and how it traditionally goes for people born into poverty. So the fact that we've made it here today, and we, being from Pakistan, the fact that we made it here today, this diversity is what drives us to be making these hard decisions that have clearly been pushed off for far too long. So I want that to really just I hope that resonates with everybody as much as it's kind of sticking with me as we're having this conversation. My program, and just kind of going back to the question, my program is designed, once again, I had some input based off the way that I was raised as well. So, all these programs throughout the city, they're going to be different. They're going to fit different various cities. But, I think that common denominator is obviously that our citizens need that guaranteed income. And with all the different programs, I think we'll really be able to get something that we can work with nationwide. So.
They got the memo.
So Cambridge Rise is we're month 13 out of 18 for our 130 single caretakers with children under 18. And why we focused on single caretakers is because we saw in the data our single caretakers with children were the most in need. But we heard from a lot of families who said, I'm struggling too. What about us? And so really because of the support we've received from MGI and how things have been going, we've decided to expand this pilot, and we're investing $22 million to expand it to every eligible family living in poverty using public dollars. So I didn't have to see that. I didn't have to wait 18 months. I didn't have to wait.
Right.
I think
Wow.
we study as we study too much. We don't need to study. Let's just do it.
Let's just do it. That's right. Congratulations. So I just want to circle back, though, to what you said, Mayor Perkins, because so often when we talk about representation matters, people look at it as tokenism instead of realizing that it's about those experiences. And we know when we say representation matters, when we put mayors like yourselves in these positions, we're going to get more empathy, more equity, and more inclusion in the policy. So thank you all for all of your leadership on this. One quick final question to go around the panel. Want to get your take on this political challenge moving forward. We've heard a lot about codifying and moving from pilots to policy. And it's been 5 years since our friend Mayor Michael Tubbs, shout out Mayor Michael Tubbs, who led the first, we're in a very giving mood for applause today, led the first mayor-led guaranteed income pilot in the country, a trailblazer, true trailblazer. But we know that there is still a long way to go, and we don't want to see it end with your term limited. We don't want to see it end with each mayor's term. So what's next in terms of your idea of turning these pilots into more long-term policy?
Sure. So for the city of New Orleans, definitely, we're using $500,000 from MGI on the private side. So the goal is to demonstrate, as we measure our impact and the effectiveness, I plan to then align it and leverage it with public dollar. So much of what will be utilized from the American Rescue Plan dollar and just general fund, quite frankly. That's where we need to go. But in addition to advocating at the federal level, I think the federal government needs to step up. We believe that we're a step closer to that with the child tax credit. Even as we talk about direct allocation for cities, we told the federal government, hey, there's already a formula, CDBG. Hello, we use it well.
Right.
So I think both continuing at that federal level, but definitely leaning in at the local level is where we have to go and where I plan to take the city of New Orleans.
All right. Mayor Siddiqui?
So in Cambridge, the Cambridge Rise was fully funded by philanthropy, and now with Rise Up Cambridge, the second iteration, we're using ARPA money, and I think the goal is to ultimately use city funds and our general fund, and I think there's so much advocacy we can do at the federal level, but even the state level. In Massachusetts in particular, we're having a new governor come in, and so she's aware that this is an interest of mine and many other cities, and it's something that we really need to do across multiple cities in Massachusetts. So I'm really trying to get more of my colleagues in Massachusetts to implement pilots. So that's a little bit of what we're doing, but it's going to be, there is a long road, but we are demonstrating it works.
Right.
I've talked about our program a lot. We are already using public dollars. We're going to do it at the city level. That's kind of the next thing. We're building out our budget right now. So we're going to continue to do that. I want to codify it into our budgets. But it's two things I want to say that I think are kind of the next steps for us and what we can control at the mayor level. Like, I can't go to the city beside me and make them do something, but I think that the overall messaging and fight right now, after I've done what I've done, is the next thing is just destigmatizing poverty in general and humanizing the citizens that are getting this help and the citizens that need more help. I think that's the next frontier of the fight that we have, and I think that makes it easier on our state and federal legislators to pass laws eventually that'll provide a guaranteed income.
Our state?
That was my next thing I was about to actually get to, Mayor Cantrell. The next thing I was going to get to, you're talking to a mayor from New Orleans and a mayor from Shreveport and a mayor from Richmond, Virginia, and you're in the Northeast. Y'all a little bit more liberal than us. But if we can get it done and get public dollars contributed to this in our budgets, don't let your legislators give you excuses on why they can't.
Right.
Don't let them give you excuses. We know that we just watched what the federal government did during the pandemic. We've watched what the federal government did to corporations each and every year. We just need them to have the will and the courage to stand up and do what's right. That's all that we need. So I think that's the next frontier so that we can push this program further and we can make it a national program.
I think I already gave out my,
Okay.
right, I said that, I have 2 budgets left, 2 fiscal years, and so I'm going to, one of these last 2 budgets, I will definitely, it's my hope to submit this policy in the budget. I do believe that elections matter.
Absolutely.
I do believe the individuals who are in the seats, who they are and what they represent, that matters, because these are individuals who will be making decisions, particularly in states like mine, which is, preemption, the Dillon rule, and,
They ain't Louisiana.
only but so much we can do. But you want folks in the legislature who understand that what poverty looks like, who is feeling poverty. It's just not something that's occurring in urban locales around the country. This is happening in rural areas as well. And I've heard what, Senator Manchin said something about, our folks don't want handouts. What they want is they want an opportunity to live a good life.
Right.
Right? Yes. They want good jobs. Yes. But sometimes you got to stop the bleeding. Right? And so we're going to just watch someone just bleed out, or we're going to step up and do something. That comes down to what Dr. King said earlier. It's about will.
Yes.
Do you have the will to do what's necessary and what's right beyond your elected office? Or you're going to be on the ballot, you're going to be up for re-election. I worry about that. No. How about we worry about the folks who are suffering? Then we can talk about the politics.
Absolutely. Thank you.
But you know what? I think we also need to kind of lift up what the gentleman was saying prior to us coming on. And as mayors, being able to stand by the work, even if someone falls short.
That's right.
And because that will happen. But when it happens, we have to continue to demonstrate the courage to stand by the program that stands by our people.
That's right.
Because they're only looking for that one. And then here they come. You talk about the naysayers.
They're looking for that audit.
Can
I audit it?
That's exactly right. And another thing I just wanted to share briefly, an experience that we had, of course, unexpected. Several weeks ago, one of our participants out of the 125 lost her life due to gun violence. And I had to make a decision, the team and I, where would her stipend go? Do you then pick it up and transfer to someone else? That was the immediate thought. But then you think about the family as well that's had to bury the loved one. So what we decided to do was to turn over the balance to the family so that they can not only bury, but then, let that live on. Right, so things happen, life happens, but we just have to stay and stand in the gap and have the courage to stand by our people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to close out by saying not just elections matter, but primaries matter. Because a lot of times, whoever wins a primary goes on to sail to the general election. So don't forget that part. And it sounded to me like you all kind of issued, as well as Dr. Bernice King earlier, issued a call to action when it comes to that will. And people don't know that we have the will if we don't express that will to our electeds. And it can start at the local level. And it is starting at the local level. So want to salute you all again for your leadership and your time here today, as well as you all in the audience for your leadership and your dedication to this issue of guaranteed income, because we're gonna make it happen. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.